Good morning. As you're all just getting settled and closing those little conversations, I hope you're enjoying time with your peers as well and making some new connections. So thank you for spending this next hour with us as we talk about using technology and innovation to manage emissions at scale. And we've got some great panelists here today who are going to go over a presentation with you, and we'll also leave 15 minutes for some Q&A at the end as well. But let me introduce our panelists to you. First of all, it's my privilege to be here on Treaty 7 territory. My name is Shannon Peston. I'm very honored to be the moderator for this panel. I am a senior advisor with the Diversity Institute and Future Skills Center. So, welcome to our panelists all the way from Kansas City. Lance Chastain, who is the co-founder and CEO of Nectivio, with extensive experience as a founder, C-level executive, and board leader, Lance has a proven track record in technology, infrastructure, sustainability, and international value chains. He brings deep expertise in helping organizations integrate decarbonization strategies to enhance operational resilience, boost profitability, and deliver strong results for all stakeholders. Welcome, Lance. Next we have Annette Geer, who is the Director of Environmental and Sustainability at Graham Construction. Annette has over 25 years of experience in environmental management, sustainability, and regulatory compliance. She's built strong relationships with government agencies and decision makers to drive impactful, long-term, sustainable environmental initiatives. She has led and audited ISO 14001 environmental management systems across North America and works to integrate sustainable practices into construction projects. Welcome, Annette. And finally, not last, but not least, but you are last, Dan Graham. Dan Graham, who is our Chief Technology Officer at Nectivio. Dan leads the development of the company's next generation greenhouse gas emissions management platform. And with over 30 years of experience in technology and executive leadership, he specializes in complex data integration and analytics, creating scalable solutions for carbon emissions tracking. Welcome, Dan. So I don't know who's going first in your presentation, but I'm going to call you up, or if you want to stay seated, I mean, the stage is yours. So, you know, in true Calgarian welcome, just take the floor, and I'm going to come back up here at 10:45 to make sure that we've got time for Q&A. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Is it on?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you all for coming this morning. We appreciate your time, and hopefully, by the time we're through, there'll be something here that you can take away, something instructive, or maybe multiple things that are constructive in your processes and in your search for how you want to go about tracking, managing, and reporting on your greenhouse gas emissions. On our first slide, which we'll flip to, we can get a sense for the scope and the size of what we walked into when we began talking with Graham in Q1 of 2024. You can see here, there's multiple thousands of emission sources. There's a lot of travel flights. There's a significant amount of office locations spread geographically. At this time, I think there were at least maybe 500 projects, that were involved as well, maybe more. And then 18,187 different data emissions points. So on top of that, which Annette can talk about, but there was also a time frame where she wanted to get her, and Graham wanted to get their 2023 sustainability report out. And coming from where they were, with Nectivio entering the picture, it was actually fascinating and very rewarding to help that be accomplished.
Thanks. Yeah, so we decided in 2023 that we were going to switch providers for our greenhouse gas inventories. We had been using a platform for a couple of years, and though it was helpful, we wanted to do more, and we felt that we weren't really getting what we needed out of that platform. So we spent some time looking for a new provider, ended up talking to Nectivio, but to be quite honest, I'm sure anybody who works in any industry knows you have a timeline and it takes way longer to get approvals and get licensing and get a contract in place. So we finally get that done in early 2024, and I call these guys up and say, yeah, so I have to finish my inventory by March 31st because we have to do our annual report. So we quickly explained to them what we needed to do, and have to say it was a great experience. Everybody kind of dove in, and we did manage to get all the data in and do our GHG inventory in probably about a month. So that was pretty impressive, but I'll let Dan talk a little bit more about what he did to make sure that happened. I just asked the question.
Yeah, the size and scope of this one was pretty impressive. This is probably the largest project we've ever done. And yeah, lots of the data was in spreadsheet format, which is challenging to say the least, to get a lot of data in from spreadsheets, especially when you have, I think we had probably 40 or 50 spreadsheets altogether. So we actually ended up developing some custom technology just to get the spreadsheets to come in faster than our normal spreadsheet import process would have. And now we can actually pull in spreadsheets even faster than we could before. The previous approach we had taken was largely based on importing the files directly into a web interface, and I won't get into the challenges with that. But we've made it even simpler now with the ability to just quite literally copy and paste sections of spreadsheets into Nectivio, and it pulls in all the data almost correctly every time. We use a little bit of AI help to get that done, and yeah, as Annette said, we managed to pull together 18,000 individual data points in under 30 days. So it's quite an exciting journey, that's to say the least, to get started.
We had some internal discussions around the idea of how much more efficient we thought our processes were, Dan, internally versus the spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. And what we actually were able to discover in real time as Dan was working through this, there's a significant amount of time to be saved, errors to be corrected, and once the manual data importing was set up into the platform, it virtually removes that from ever needing to happen again. Mm-hmm. There were different units of measure on different spreadsheets that have been compiled over some time, multiple people touching them, all working hard to do a good job, of course, but very difficult to keep pace with what fully automated system can actually provide. I don't know if, Dan, if there's any additional on that you'd like to offer in terms of insights that you saw that might be helpful to the audience in terms of their own path of what they're trying to do now or are doing.
Yep. In general, I'd say if you're using spreadsheets, there's probably a faster way. But we have noticed that most systems out there that do this today still largely do it on spreadsheets. If spreadsheets is all you got, that's probably all you need. Most of the systems out there aren't really doing anything more than the math, and frankly, the math can be done in Excel. So when you really want to start scaling up and do this with larger data points, you kind of need to get away from spreadsheets. You need to get away from manual data entry entirely. If people are punching in numbers all the time, that's probably going to be a large source of error. So that was kind of our first goal after we completed the 2023 inventory was, how can we get rid of the spreadsheets from the process? So,
great.
Yeah, I think we have a Slido to show you guys. So a chance for you guys to participate in our discussion here today. Mm-hmm. I always find this part really exciting. I don't know about anyone else. but like just seeing what people are doing and like understanding it and understanding the challenges, like as a product geek, that really gets me excited. So this is really cool. Really appreciate everybody who's taking the time to answer these questions today. And I hope you kind of learned something too about where you're at and where you compare with kind of some of the other companies. So we are seeing this is a very common thing that most companies who are doing this are still using a very spreadsheet-based approach. Some companies have moved onto like carbon accounting software of some kind. So this is still very much in line with what we've been seeing in the industry. And yeah, I hope you guys learned something today along with me.
Well, not to sound like a sales guy, but our product, we actually have 3 different platforms or 3 different levels, and serving virtually every size of business. So we're sector agnostic in terms of we don't limit our software. We'll work with virtually any type of organization or business. And so for those that are here with their spreadsheets, if you want to think about something else, of course, we're always happy to talk about that. But we do serve a wide range of businesses, single, double, 2 locations, all the way up to a multinational company like Graham. So if you want to talk to us about that later, feel free. This next slide here is kind of cool, really. This came out when we were in the process of talking about how are we going to get the sustainability report done. And you all had a previous year where you'd done the survey, and we wanted to get that into Nectivio. Maybe talk about the challenge of how that.
Yeah, so as Lance was saying, so our previous provider, we had done our 2 previous, so Nectivio came in, we were in year 3 of doing formal GHG inventories for Graham. And at that point, we were including, I should have said this probably earlier, our facilities, so our office spaces, our fleet, and just some of our projects. And we did scope 1 and 2 and limited scope 3 emissions. We probably should have started with that earlier, sorry. But yeah, so we had used the software previously to do our employee commuting. And some people are like, well, why would you include the employee commuting for starters? And it was kind of twofold for us. One, it was something that engaged everybody at Graham. So as we're talking about sustainability, as we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions, trying to look at reductions, every person at Graham got the survey. So even if they weren't involved in other areas where emissions were being generated, it was good to keep that conversation going and bring it to every person at Graham. And secondly, because of the nature of our business, we have people who commute, 2 weeks on and a week off by plane. We have people on the coast that literally drive to a barge, get on the barge, go to site every day. We have people who are taking care of multiple projects, so they're driving, different distances. So having a really good picture of how our employees got to work, what modes of transportation they used, as well as all the other travel that we did, was super important to us. And though, like I said, it is a Scope 3 emission, it was something we wanted to capture to know what we were doing and what we could do to change it. And then as well, like I said, it was because it got everybody in the company involved. So after the first ask of, can you do my inventory in a month, I said, oh, and by the way, we usually use this tool to do our commuter survey, and now we don't have it anymore, and I don't really want to use an MS Forms. Can you build something in the software that's going to be able to do it for us? So.
Yeah, this one was pretty fun actually, because when you look at the commuter surveys, and we had, it was really exciting to actually have the data from the previous years in terms of like response rates and how people were going through the surveys. And so you run into kind of this interesting challenge of you have to kind of balance keeping the survey easy enough that you will get a high response rate with making the survey detailed enough that you're going to get an accurate response rate. So that was really quite the challenge in all of this, was like, how do you make these forms simple? How do you get as many people as you can to complete them? The approach taken in the 2022 year involved, I think, scanning QR codes, you said. Yes, and just trying to like get people to do that was quite a challenge even of itself. So we developed the employee
codes and bribes of chocolate.
Yes. So we developed our employee commuting module designed to kind of like really keep the questions simple. We got it down to 5 simple questions that we could ask everybody. And we also noticed one other strange anomaly with the 2022 data, particularly in the Toronto area. We noticed that based on what the data said, it would imply that people in the Toronto area were commuting on average 3 hours a day, which didn't seem to make sense to us. And what we were able to kind of identify was there was an anomaly in the data. So somebody had, whether it was a typo, whether it was legitimately somebody misread the question, don't know. But somebody had significantly over accounted for how much commuting they did in a typical day. So we knew that, and we knew that was also part of the things that we had to take into consideration when we designed our employee commuting interface. So this is what we came up with for Nectivio. So Nectivio first will break your company into commuter groups. You want to have a different commuter group based on the sort of profile of a typical commuter. So we break them up, in Graham's case, we broke them up typically by office area. So somebody in Toronto, for example, is likely to have a significantly longer commute than somebody in the Calgary area. And of course, you're never going to get everybody to respond to your survey, so we always have to adjust up based on an average profile. So the way Nectivio works, and the way pretty much all these surveys work, is that you will calculate more or less the average commuting profile for an employee, and then you adjust based on your actual number of employees. And so we did something very similar to that in our calculations, and one of the things we opted for was to use email instead of a QR code. So in using email, we can send email requests off to anyone that we want. And because we have individual emails, we can also send them reminders if they didn't fill out our survey. So just that little email campaign, that alone probably helped improve our response rate significantly. And so this is what the survey actually looked like for all the employees who got one. So they would have gotten an email, and they would have clicked the email link, and they would have come up with this. So it'll ask very simple questions like, how often do you commute to your workplace? And we know that sometimes people make typos on this sort of thing, so we actually made it smart enough that if you put in a very large number, it will warn you that, hey, you've indicated that you're going to the office a very large number of times. Now, sometimes that actually happens. Sometimes somebody might live across the street from the office and they just go home for lunch on a regular basis or for breaks. So it does actually allow this. But when you type in a big number like that, it's going to warn you that, hey, this is probably unusual. Similar story happens when we type in the distance. Type in, say, 120 kilometers, which is the upper limit we found for about how far somebody will be typically commuting to work. But we had some employees who would commute to work once a week, and they would drive 400, 500, 600 kilometers and stay the week. So it wasn't unusual to see that at all. And again, the system will allow that, but it gives the warning. And that alone, those two warnings alone, helped us eliminate a lot of the data entry errors that we got from our people. We simplified how we asked people how they commuted to work. We always start with a couple of important questions first, like, are you commuting in a fleet vehicle, and are you carpooling? And those two are first for a reason. They're first because if you are in that situation, it's not a Scope 3 Category 7 anymore. If you have one of those situations, you are either double counting in the case of somebody who's getting a ride with their coworker, or you are somebody in a fleet vehicle, in which case their fleet vehicle is already included in the Scope 1 inventory, and we don't want to include it in the Category 7. So we ask those two first, and then we go into the sort of other common ways people might get to work. Private vehicle, bus, public transit, intercity train, something active like walking, taking a bike, or taking a rideshare service like Uber or something like that. And then we also had this something else, and I was actually surprised to see this something else. We got some answers in something else. We had to look into what that was, and that was, as Annette mentioned earlier, some people actually had to ride on a barge to get to their workplace on a regular basis.
Yeah, and then I think we had someone in Seattle who literally lived and took their boat across and then went to the office because of where they were, right? But we didn't think of that, but that was their typical commute. The other really cool information we got out of this, it was nice to do the emissions, but it also let us know how our employees were getting to work. So as a result of the better information we have, we've started looking at company subsidized transit to encourage people to take transit to go to work. We were able to know how many EVs we had at each office to evaluate the need for chargers at the offices. So like I said, aside from being part of the inventory, being able to really have this data and be able to slice and dice it for what we needed allowed us to also inform some decisions we were making in our sustainability program as well.
Yeah. And the results ended up speaking for themselves. Not only did we get a 58% response rate, which is unbelievable, and for the math geeks in the room, that gave us a 1.58% margin of error. But we also got, as Annette said, we got a bunch of very useful data in terms of like, how are people getting to work? And this is what Nectivio is all about. Nectivio is all about giving you the data so that you can make informed choices about how to reduce your emissions. Most of the systems out there, most of the approaches out there, most of the things people will talk about, they'll only talk about how do you calculate your total emissions. And that's great, and if that's where you've started, I'm super proud of you. Thank you for doing that. But it doesn't help you move the needle, and that's what we're really about. It's like understanding how to move the needle, and to do that, you need detailed data. You need detailed data at scale, and that's how you understand what decisions can you make that will change your emissions profiles. All righty. So I think we have another Slido question for you guys, another chance to participate. It is still very common. Like often you just don't have the data and you have to make an educated guess, or maybe not so educated guess. Interesting. So yes, the most common and strongly recommended approach is the one at the top, doing it based on your fuel consumption. The amount of fuel you burn correlates very strongly with the CO2 emissions, with your CH4 emissions, your N2O emissions. It does vary slightly by about 3 to 5% based on like what's burning the fuel, but for the most part, your fuel number is your most accurate number. So I'm excited to see that this number has gone up. The last couple of times I've done this sort of survey, we've seen a lot more of the industry averages sort of approaches, things based on distance. So we are heading in the right direction. That's great. That's great to see.
Very good.
All right.
Dan, you want to flip to the next slide and we'll talk about our automating data collection. This is an area where we really shine. I get paid to say that, but we're pretty good at it in terms of being able to bring data in from just about any system that you have in your organization or outside of your organization. And it's not just spend data. We can do that too, but we prefer actual emissions activity data so that we can actually drive a much more accurate and robust emissions profile with that data. As we moved forward with Graham, we identified in some of our conversations about 10, I think, or so different types of emission sources. And so working with Annette, we decided, well, there's going to be 2 or 3 that we want to tackle as a priority. And so we began with the light duty on-road trucks, and then also looked at the off-road equipment, that pretty substantial in numbers. And then we also needed to, because of that equipment moving around, we needed to figure out how to get the project hierarchy from SAP into, or where it would match up with what was happening with where the vehicles were being tracked in a telematics solution called Geotab. Mm-hmm. And then the off-road equipment had a fourth, or there was another aggregating type of telematics software that was pulling in from Caterpillar, and I think there's 3 or 4 other heavy equipment manufacturers that we had to tie into as well. So this kind of took us into several additional layers. And the type of things that we identified that needed to be looked into from a emission standpoint, of course, were electricity and natural gas, on-road vehicles, off-road equipment, shipping and transportation costs, employee-related travel expenses, building materials, project locations, and non-building material supplies. We'll talk more about building materials in a little bit here when we get into embodied emissions. But all this data was in different places, and we had to go about putting the necessary pieces in place to be able to pull that in. Annette, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that?
I will. Just to give a little context, so we were implementing Nectivio at the same time we're trying to do all these improvements to how we did our greenhouse gas inventories. As I said earlier, in the early days, we really focused on our offices and our fleet. We knew the fleet was going to be sort of our biggest source of emissions, so that was kind of a no-brainer. And then the offices, because we really wanted to get people on board and we had consumption. So we're trying to improve the amount of data that we could report on and the locations we could report on. At the same time, we're trying to implement a new software. And I think what was really nice about Nectivio was the scalability of it. There's 5 ways to enter data into the system.
Actually up to 7 now.
Oh, okay. And I mean, we're all a business, so you're not going to automate absolutely everything. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make financial sense. Like, there's a lot of different things going on. So it was really nice to sit down with these guys and go, all right, so the projects we had to have. We were at the point where we've got clients who want to know what our emissions are on a particular project. So doing it at a high level wasn't cutting it anymore. When we brought the locations into Nectivio, I think we were just over 600 active projects. And those can change on a weekly basis, give or take. So what we did set up an automation, which I'm sure Dan will talk about a little more, but that pulls it out so that, as a new project comes on board, it gets added to the system. If we close the project, it would get archived. So that was really good, and that allowed us to then be able to report at a project level. But it also meant, when it came to things like our fleet and the information that was coming in from Geotab, the project numbers had to match the project numbers that were in the location fields in order to make sure that the equipment was tagged to the right project. Also means working with our fleet guys so that they're really up to date when that piece of equipment, say a loader, leaves this project and gets transported to that project, or comes back and sits in a yard for a couple of months. So been a construction company and been across 2 countries, there's a lot of pieces of equipment, a lot of projects, and a lot of things that might just be there. A scissor lift might spend a week on a site, and then it might go to some other site. So it was just a lot. So it was really nice to be able to automate those, and I'll let Dan talk a little bit more about that, but it has definitely my confidence in what we're able to report today. And I mean, we are still early on this journey. We're still making improvements. We're still identifying things we want to do. But at least now, if I send a client a number for the project, at least to the best of the ability that we know today, we have put all the emissions for that project against that project. So we've come a long way in a very short period of time.
Yeah. So one of the challenges you have when you've got literally thousands of projects and you're trying to track the information down to the project level as well, that means you need all of your equipment down to the project level as well. So at that point, spreadsheets just do not cut it. You cannot have people manually typing in information for thousands of vehicles across multiple projects. So automating was kind of the only solution here that would make this work. So I don't actually have a great way of demonstrating exactly how this works because it all happens wonderfully automatically behind the scenes. But I will show you a couple of examples of the results of these sorts of automations. So as Annette mentioned, they have thousands and thousands of projects at any given point in time. So even just keeping the project list up to date requires a full set of automation. And so we were able to tie into SAP, we were able to pull out the project list, and this updates daily. So every single project they have, and I won't show off all of them, but we are able to kind of pull it all through automatically, and this stays up to date in real time. We also have the vehicles as well. I'll show what that looks like. So you have a vehicle like this one. This is a truck, and you would not be able to put in the data for this truck on a regular basis, but thanks to Geotab, it's pulling the data for fuel consumption on, I think it's a 15-minute base, every 15-minute basis. So you can see the data numbers come in and this is just one vehicle, and we've got literally hundreds of data points just for this one vehicle alone. And that's all coming in through the telematics system. There's no manual entry of the data anywhere. Geotab's telematics system, the way it works, it's got a little box about this big, plugs into the OBD2 port of the vehicle, and just records the fuel consumption. Gives you all sorts of wonderful other things. Certainly Geotab isn't the only telematics solution that we work with. So if you have other telematics solutions in your organization, we can also pull from that. But in doing this sort of automation, we now have the data on the vehicle down to literally the minute in terms of like how much consumption it's got. And now that we have that, we can associate that back to every individual project and keep track of like the emissions on a per project basis. Alrighty.
And again, is this on? Yeah. To kind of go back to what I was saying earlier too, and what we've been able to do by having Nectivio provide us this data is, so now between Geotab and Nectivio, not only do we know the consumption for our projects, but we can dig in deeper and look at idle times, driving habits, and really start to identify potentials for us to actually drive reductions. Mm-hmm. Before we had Geotab, before we had Nectivio, you know, we knew we had all these trucks, and we knew how much diesel or gasoline they burned in any given year. But you know, Geotab is very much a safety platform as well, if anybody's familiar with it. So much to some employees' reluctance when we first got it, if you set a tolerance, if you're speeding for more than a couple of minutes, the truck starts to beep at you. And if you don't slow down, it will send a notice to your manager that you're speeding. Same thing, like hard accel. This one doesn't really send notices, but like, you know, the people who like step on the gas and then jam on the brake, which we all know is not actually good for fuel economy, Geotab records those things too. So like I said, having to have it and then been able to access it and digest it and figure out what we're doing is also allowed us to identify places where we're this year putting out programs on driving habits and idle reductions. So like I said, it definitely has helped us report on our GHG emissions, but I mean, the power it's provided us to make decisions about our sustainability program and where we want to focus, especially on, you know, the environmental side and the emissions on this, in this particular case, has been phenomenal. So it's definitely, if I were to look back to where I was 2 years ago and what we're able to do now, like when I go present to our leadership and say, hey, we need to do this, like I can back it up with graphs and data and numbers and not, we should do this because I know we're probably not doing a really great job, but I actually have no evidence that we're not doing a really great job. So yeah, it's definitely been changing for us.
Well, you touch on an interesting point there too, is like one of the challenges with doing those estimations based on like distance and other industry averages is a common situation for Graham will be that they have trucks in the field that are left idling. And while it's idling, it's burning fuel, and while it's burning fuel, it's producing emissions, but the odometer isn't changing. So if you estimate based on distance and you've got a situation where vehicles are idling a lot, particularly on a construction site, well, that's not being accounted in your inventory. So by tying into something like Geotab and pulling those emissions in real time based on the fuel consumption as opposed to the distance the vehicle traveled, we're actually able to calculate with a higher degree of accuracy. And it shows, like when we go and talk to people about, you know, strategies for reducing the times the vehicle said idling, and sometimes that's just as simple as saying, please shut the vehicle off when you're not driving it. But that actually shows in the inventory now. So like we can see those emissions reductions, whereas if you only had done your emissions based on distance, you wouldn't see those reductions, you know, from changes in idling habits. So.
Very good. So keeping in mind that we're working our way through 2024 now, okay, on a timeline basically that began around the first quarter of 24. This next module that we're going to talk about, it kind of has an interesting backstory, but moving rapidly along, okay, with getting the platform stood up, commuting emissions in, these other integrations we just went through for a significant amount of equipment. And then we were approached last year about the concept of being able to read concrete tickets to come in from different job sites and be able to pull in that data using the AI to read those tickets to begin to get a sense for what is the emissions that are being accumulated in the concrete, right? And as we continued that discussion, we looked at several different things, several different ideas. The Toronto Metrolink SCOW project came up, and Annette can talk more about that, but within that project became an even greater superset of emissions requirement for embodied emissions across, I believe, 7 different materials.
Yes, 7.
Yeah, inclusive of concrete, aluminum, steel, wood, et cetera, along with some other things which we may talk about a little bit later. So we began this working closely with Annette and her team, defined from the regulations and from the project, defined exactly what was needed. And we're going to give you a little demo on this as we talk more about it. But it's an amazing next step, an amazing module that can be bolted onto the platform to capture emissions by project and be able to provide then, which we'll show you an example of, a real-time dashboard for in compliance with the regulations that are being put out for this particular project. Just a couple other things here. The requirements that we wanted to meet and that were put upon us, we wanted to make sure that we could provide, I'm just going to go through these here, they're pretty cool. Quick and easy mobile in-field data capture. So using a phone, a tablet to be able to capture data from within the field. We're going to demo this for you with fully automated real-time results, capturing the pictures of the source data for auditing and verification later. Complete mobile workflow. So if you're in the field, and it doesn't just work for concrete tickets, it'll work for any kind of a ticket, it'll work to read meters, it'll work to read anything that, if you have somebody in the field and you want to capture something, and then AI will then interpret that and give you the opportunity to correct it or let it enter in. Using geolocation to organize where you are and where that data is coming from, and other things which I'll let Dan go into when he talks about it. But significant to the underlying capability of this module is the mobile in-field data capture. Dan or Annette,
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add or.
Actually, did you want to, I think we have one more Slido.
We do have one more slide.
And if we set that up, I can talk a little bit about the project
ahead.
and my ask, because I think it's getting at the point where when the phone rings and Lance and Dan see it's me, they're like, what does she want to do now? Because every time we get one thing stood up and running, I'm like, oh, can we do this now? Can we do that
It gets
now?
quite exciting, actually.
So with Metro, I don't know if anybody's familiar, but Metrolinx is doing a incredible amount of rail upgrades and work in Toronto. So it's all their local, their GO trains, the Ontario line, the Barrie line. So we had done one previously, the Davenport Diamond. On that one, Metrolinx has a sustainability directive and some goals. So we were literally using spreadsheets. We had to track our energy consumption, we had to track our waste from site, and we had a few other KPIs for sustainability that we had to report on. So, come into 2024, we've got Nectivio on board. We're kicking off a new project for Metrolinx, which is the St. Clair Old Weston Smart Track Station. And now the requirements for reporting for sustainability have gotten even more prescriptive in the contract. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, so we have the electricity, everything's coming out of here, but then we also need it to track some of the embodied emissions associated with the construction of the project itself. And then we need it to track materials coming to site, leaving to site, waste diversion, and even the GHGs associated with getting our materials to site. So of course I call these guys up and say, hey, I've got a report on all these things. Can we talk about what we might be able to do to keep it all in the system? Because now that we're using this, it's great. But of course, like I said, every time they figure out the answer to my question, I have a new ask. But I'll let Dan talk a little bit more. Well, I guess we can talk about the Slido, but that's the kind of the backstory of how we got to having to look at this module that we're actually just getting ready to pilot.
Yeah. So I will say that this is kind of like the story we've heard over and over and over again. Like when we talk to companies about how do they manage their greenhouse gas emissions, how can they track it, how can they get it easier, what's your biggest problem? Nobody ever says it's the math. Everybody says, almost always, the single biggest problem is the one that you see on the screen today, just collecting the data. And collecting the data at scale is usually the biggest problem most organizations have, which is the big area that we've tried to focus on here at Nectivio, is like making it easier to collect data. And no one solution works for any organization, which is why, as Annette mentioned, we've come up with 7 so far, and we'll probably keep going at this as we keep discovering new problems and new challenges that need to be solved. So. I'll show you really quick what what it actually looks like for the people in the field when they are using our mobile app to capture purchases. So unlike my other demonstrations, this one's a pre-recorded video. So comes up, the user will select what they are adding. In this case, they're going to pick a concrete ticket. The system will actually use the phone's location to identify which projects the person is physically closest to. And in doing that, that lets them specify the project without us having to track a project code. They can take a picture of the ticket. In this case, it's a concrete ticket, though this would work with any invoice or waybill. Once the ticket has been photographed, uploads to our servers. A custom-trained AI will run through that ticket and pull out the pertinent information. Like all AIs, ours is not perfect. It will not always get it right. Anybody who says their AI will get it right 100% of the time is trying to sell you something. And so we immediately show the information that it got. In this case, it missed the air content. I think it actually wasn't on the form, if I remember right. And it missed the supplier, so they had to manually add that. But that was all they had to do. And if you actually look at the timing of that video, that was just under a minute. And I purposely had to pause a few times when I recorded this video just so I have time to talk through it. Because in the real world, it actually takes about 27 seconds. So the actual time required to put in data, to capture a field ticket, doesn't matter what the purchase is, doesn't matter if it's concrete, doesn't matter if it's other materials. We can capture all of that, and we can do it in the field in real time with the phone. It goes up to the device. And not only that, we're also capturing the documentation with it as well. So because we've taken a picture of that concrete ticket, we now have that concrete ticket recorded. So if you're ever getting audited and somebody's reviewing your results, you can show, like, this was the ticket, here's the actual photograph of it, here's the data. And you've got that information tied into the system as well, just to back up your results there. So that came to the next really exciting part.
Jump right into this.
Yeah,
We've got about 5 minutes left before questions, and you can just advance it.
Yeah, sure. So with the St. Clair Old Western project in particular, Metrolink specifically wanted to be able to see the results. They wanted to be able to specifically see how much purchases were being made of various materials like concrete, like wood. They wanted to know how much fuel was being burned, and they wanted to know what the emissions were. And in order to kind of do that, rather than producing reports on a regular basis, we have started to create a dashboard that they can now log into and see this stuff in real time. So I'm going to show you what that looks like now. And this is basically what it looks like. So in real time, they are able to see for a given project what the emissions were by month, the fuel consumption by month, the material purchases by month. We are adding additional information related to soil flow and water movements as well. And this allows Graham to, without any extra effort, keep Metrolink in the links of all of their sustainability information. So they don't have to go in, they don't have to produce reports, they don't have to spend time on it. I don't know how many FTEs that's going to save in the long run, but it's probably a decent number in and of itself.
When we say real time, daily. right?
No, we mean like
Or
instantaneously.
as the tickets.
Yes, as this data comes in,
Data
these
comes in.
numbers immediately update. There, actually, I don't have time right now, but I would actually demonstrate that if you wanted to see it. Feel free to come up and talk to me after. Happy to show you how this works. But in real time, we show this information. And this works for not just this project, but they could have multiple projects. And so we show this, right? Like we have the ability to, provide lists of projects. You can configure the projects right in Nectivio, which projects you're available to see. And it's that simple for you to be able to show this information in real time to your customers. And again, all of this is about providing information needed to make better decisions. Most of the sort of sustainability we've seen in the past has all been just like, what's your number, what's your total? And what's your total doesn't tell you how to change anything. But if you've got the details, if you've got the numbers, well now, whether it's Metrolinx, whether it's Graham, whether it's somebody else, well, now you can start making smarter decisions. And you can start improving and moving the needle on the amount of emissions you're actually producing. Yeah. Okay. I think that's everything we have to cover today. Yeah. So I'll let our moderator come back up here.
That was so informative, and I couldn't agree more. As a math geek myself, there's always the story in the numbers, and when we can unravel those stories, we can see what decisions and strategic decisions you made, and just what a great partnership and an example of being able to work on this in time. You talk about doing it in record time. Again, the conversation together and finding those strategic alliances is so important. So I want to open it up for questions. I think we've got someone running around the room maybe with a microphone, but if not, just stand up. I can always repeat your question to make sure that people in the back, oh, perfect, there we are, thank you very much. Any questions? I see a hand up right here, thank you. Just 1 second, because that microphone's coming to you.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation, and I think it was awesome, and we all understand how important automation is in the emissions world. I'm Edli Radoko, I'm with Cenovus, and we have had a lot of automation projects over the years, and we are still in the progress of doing some. But some of the challenges that we have seen, as we all see with large data set, it has to do with data standard and governance. Because if you don't have good data standard and governance, then it's going to be garbage in and garbage out. So I was wondering, what are some of the challenges that you saw as part of this project on the data standardization? Like a caterpillar can be spelled in 5 different ways, cat or caterpillars or with double T. So what are some of the challenges that you saw on the data standardization, and how did you solve it? And also on the data governance, when you record the data, if it is recorded wrong, what are some of the processes of the QA/QC and the data governance to make the data available to be automated?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you.
So I think, from Graham's perspective, early years, we had a lot of issues with data. Getting data, like you say, when it came to coding things in our system, like, perfect example was waste, someone hauling waste from site, whether that was recycling, waste. It got coded to, I think it was in the end, 21 different numbers. So it took us forever to sort those things out. The nice thing I found with Nectivio, definitely, I'm sure we'll still have learnings. Like I said, we're really piloting this right now. But we've tied everything to a project number, which, at Graham, nothing. I don't know if there's anything that doesn't have the project number on it. That's one thing. Just because of the nature of our business, that is consistent. It's tied to a project. All of the vehicle stuff, and I think that was the key when we actually did the integrations with Geotab, and then as well with the system that pulls from all of our different manufacturer data centers, is that even if there was a typo in Caterpillar, it didn't matter because we were pulling the telematics for a particular unit, right? And those are coming in real time. With the GeoTab, same thing. It's all tied to a unit number, so it removed that human error. Or, what we found the year before too was that a piece of equipment had been on a site and then it moved, but we didn't track where it had gone, so it was still showing emissions for a project that in theory had finished, but all of a sudden it was still showing emissions for months after the project finished. So I think the automation has been good for those type of things. When it comes to like our invoices and that, I guess twofold is one, having the photo, especially early on, we're doing a lot of checks just to see how accurately it's going in. And the other thing that Nectivio was able to provide was to put a percentage on there that if it, if it's been 10 meters and all of a sudden it jumps up by more than 10%, it flags it so that when I look at the dashboard, it shows anomalies in the data. So I'll go look at it, look at the actual invoice. It might be just that we did triple the amount of work that month and it's fine, or it might be someone added an extra zero. I can correct it and resave it. So like I said, I think we're getting there. You probably could also share some learnings that I haven't come up with yet. And on a governance side, mostly we've embedded all of our sustainability data collection greenhouse gas inventories into our, we call it GMS, our Graham management system, which has stage gates for all the different things that happen on a project. So it's become part of the process people already know. So it's embedded with our quality system, our environmental system, our overarching management system, and things are in standards, guidelines, policies. So again, not foolproof by any means, but we're trying to manage it as best we can, and I'm sure there'll still be lots of learnings.
Yep. So like whenever you're collecting data, if you can take the human out of it, that's usually a good way to start reducing errors, because we are wonderful people, but we make mistakes. Whenever you do have to have humans actually entering information, you always want to try and flag outliers in your data. So you saw examples of that when I did the employee commuting module, where we were flagging, cases where somebody was putting in abnormally large numbers. And I often find that there can be a large number that's valid and a large number that's not valid. So you usually need a bit of a gray area as well of like, this data point needs to be checked, but isn't necessarily wrong. And then you have, it's just impossible for it to be that large or that small or that whatever. So as far as like fixing your data quality problems go, if you can capture things automatically with any sort of automated process, that's your first option and best option. So there's lots of different ways you can do that with IoT devices, with telematics, and so on. Anomaly detection is rapidly growing field. We're using lots of different interesting AIs to also detect anomalies in data. That's quite interesting. And on the data governance side, a lot of it is like keeping that backup data as well. So like when we capture those concrete tickets, for example, like we've got the original ticket there. If the AI pulled the number wrong and the human didn't catch it there, and the data anomaly detection flags it, well, now you've got something to go back to and figure out, okay, well, what actually went wrong? On one of our other clients, we had a case where the fuel data entry was manually entered into their telematic system, and the person entered an odometer number in the fuel number, and Nectivio flagged it. So instead of entering like the 200 liters it was supposed to be, the person had entered 1,200 some odd kilometers as the amount of fuel, which of course was flagged immediately as a much too large a number to be putting into a gas tank. And in doing so, they were able to go back to the original photograph of in that case it was the gasoline receipt. They were able to go back to the original photograph and understand, oh, okay, this was the right number, this is what it should have been, and correct the data just like that. So.
Thank you. We've got time for a couple more questions. Maybe I'll ask the question, like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing from the client side? Like, if there was a message that you wanted to get out, that something is as simple as, or what is, what message would you have to industry for some of those of us who are still using spreadsheets and might not be where Graham is, for example, or?
I would just say that from all the clients we talk to, that once you reach a point where you want to look at something beyond spreadsheets, it can be very confusing about what's out there. There's all kinds of different platforms and different promises. I would say to look for a company that you genuinely have a sense that knows what they're talking about. It has use cases where they've actually done what it is that you want them, or that you need them to do, or what you're hoping they can do. And I would also encourage you to reach out to, if it's Nectivio or others, and we do this a lot. We'll sit down with a client and say, okay, kind of in a discovery call, tell us what you're doing, tell us how you're doing it, and then we can talk to them about how we might go about doing that with them to give them a sense of, oh, here's how it would be working with us. And quite frankly, it's just like what you saw sitting here today. Interaction back and forth, communication, and learning what their challenges are and what they're really trying to get done. Because there's a little bit of voodoo between spreadsheets and software, and there's, to use a funny word, and we try to we do a really good job of removing that and getting it from that spreadsheet to that platform type setup. I would say. I don't know if anybody else wants to add.
Yeah, and I think my only advice, because like I said, we sure haven't got it all figured out. We probably have a lot to learn and lots to still do, but we keep trying to make it better. And whether that's making sure that the information going into your spreadsheets is more accurate, because the first time I did it, I was estimating based on kilometers driven on vehicles, because that's the number I had. I had a total fuel number for Graham, but to look at projects and stuff, we didn't have it. We knew how much, and as Dan said, there's a big difference in someone who's driving their Graham truck on a regular basis and the site trucks that often don't leave the site for 2 years, but we had no idea whether they idled on site for any amount of time, right? So it's improving, but yeah, I think anytime we're doing something to try and make it better, I think we're all doing the right thing. And like I said, for us, this has been the solution that's allowed me to spend more time figuring out how to make our sustainability program better and less time chasing down data and spreadsheets, which is what I was doing previously. So just a better, more efficient use of our time. It's been great to work with these guys, no doubt. But for me, it lets me do the cool stuff and not call 100 people. I don't have your data. I need this. Chasing accounts to find copies of invoices. So like I said, everybody's journey will be different, but it's certainly, we've come a long way from spreadsheets, but we did those for a while too.
Yeah. Well, and I think you make a really good point too about the fact that it is a journey, and you're not going to have it all done right away. You're not going to be able to do it all, from day one, and don't expect that. You got to start somewhere. Start small, start simple, start with something you can achieve. And if that's just taking your total fuel consumption numbers and plugging it into a calculator real quick, thank you. I am very proud of the people who do that, because you're taking that first step. And yeah, it's a journey, and we'll happily join you on that journey if you like. And yeah,
Well, and I think one of the things that I love is seeing the progression. It's like, oh, can we do this? And oh, it's almost like our imaginations are unlocked when we see the power of what this information can give. We've got time for one last question, and then we'll go to the next session.
Okay, thank you. And I'm pretty sure the answer is yes, but you didn't touch upon it. So even a company like Graham, they do work on our behalf of another company. So building infrastructure on our behalf. Thinking of something like LEED and how much waste was generated. So super cool that you're looking at different data sets. So I assume you have the ability to create customized reports that would help facilitate and potentially with those records, which is awesome. So I just wanted to ask about, is the capabilities of reporting there? And then the other thing is just thinking about us being a Canadian company and data security. Is your data backed up on Canadian servers for those companies that have that as a limitation to your product?
So I'll answer the data sovereignty question first. Yes, our servers are in Canada. We actually can also provide servers in the United States for people who would need that. So that's easy enough. And I'll let you go at the first one.
Yeah,
You got 1 minute.
Okay. Jen, I think for the client reporting and the documentation, those project dashboards we showed is sort of the first step toward that. And like I said, we are currently piloting the embodied emissions data capture as we speak. So we've got about 3 months of doing that before we roll it out to the rest of our organization. But yeah, for the very reason, same thing like we do the waste reporting every month and then annually, those things now will come out of something like this, and then we'll have all the backup. And the nice thing is, as a client, if you're so interested, we would just give you access to your dashboard, and you could go in and look at it at any time. We have discussed lead credits. It's not something we've pursued entering at this time, only because, like I said, I need to be careful how many times I say, hey, can you do this? Can you do this? And then on the other hand, it's like, go to my board and say, so we want to make this and want to do, right? So it is definitely a journey, but yeah, we've already been thinking that too, because as soon as you have the materials coming to site, we're already checking the EPDs to assign the embodied carbon, so it's only a matter of adding the lead credit as well, but that's a on the wish list item right now.
Dan, Annette, and Lance, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us about how this partnership worked and for doing a demonstration too so that we can see how it looked. Just show our gratitude to our panelists today, please. And thank you to all of you as well.